If you've been on social media this week, it seems like everyone has become a mergers and acquisitions expert. I'm not sure why, but I want to break down what I learned after spending the last week in Miami with our top teams, our top growth ambassadors, and our executive team. So, Monday at 7 a.m., the news dropped that Real is in agreement to purchase REMAX, and the deal should go through in like the next few months. So, I want to kind of break down what happened, obviously like who is REMAX, why we are purchasing REMAX, what's going to happen after, and then what's kind of on my mind with all of this, right? So first, what was announced, right? Real and REMAX announced that they have entered into a definitive agreement under which Real is going to acquire REMAX to create what will be a leading technology-enabled global real estate platform. So the acquisition, brings together like the tech-focused brokerage of Real, and then REMAX's like iconic real estate brand, and they've their franchise network, and they have over 100,000 agents in like 120 countries and territories. The combined company will have 8,500 franchisees, over 180,000 agents, and 100,000 of those based in the US and Canada. REMAX, if you don't know, they are an iconic brand in the real estate world. They were founded in 1973. They offered basically a franchise model and allowed franchisees to kind of have the flexibility to make their comp plans, which then allowed their agents to operate their business with a decent amount of independence. REMAX is the largest franchise brand in the industry. They're the number one most trusted name in real estate. They've got a mortgage company, Motto Mortgage, and they have, again, like 145,000 agents across 8,500 offices in 120 different countries and territories. And they have some of the most productive agents in the industry. As far as like why Real is purchasing REMAX, it'll allow us to create a more innovative and more productive, like connected real estate group between the two companies. And once the closing goes through, the combined company is going to be named Real REMAX Group, and the two companies will continue to operate independently. Real Broker under Real, and then REMAX and Motto under the current brand names. And it's going to be headquartered in Miami with some operations still in the Denver area. And then we'll have like Tamir, who's our current CEO. He'll be the chairman and CEO of Real REMAX Group. Jenna, our COO, is going to be the chief integration officer. And then obviously there's going to be other leadership positions that are added in or potentially changed, because like obviously we both have full executive teams and staffing and things like that. Obviously, more will shake out there. I think that right now we're going to add 3 members from the REMAX board, and so we'll have a combined board of 10 board members. So, again, nothing's going to change from like an operations perspective today. Real is going to continue to operate as Real. REMAX will continue to operate as REMAX. But I think that as, things kind of progress, there's definitely ways in which Real's tech can help REMAX to be more productive. So that's kind of where things are at right now. All right. So there's 4 things that I think people aren't really talking about with this transaction that I think are interesting. The first thing is competition. So people have been talking about REMAX potentially being sold for a bit. And there are a few kind of reasons why. The first is their agent count. And so if you look at their agent count, if you look back to like 2020 and look at the reports from like 2020, 2021. So in 2021, they were sitting at like 141, 142-ish thousand agents across the globe, right? Right now they're sitting at about 145 or more than 145,000 agents across the globe. But when you look at it and you break out just the United States, if they were sitting at 84,000 agents in 2020, it went up to like 86-ish thousand by 2022. But then in 2025, I think that they're sitting closer to around 70 to 75,000 agents in the United States and Canada. And so that number has decreased over the years. There's been, the declining agent count. When you look at like the REMAX Holdings stock that is traded on the New York Stock Exchange, 5 years ago, they were sitting at like $36. And so that's declined, to about like $11 today. Obviously, if you looked at the stock over the past week, it did have a pop when the acquisition was announced. All of this to say that people have been talking about the fact that REMAX was kind of ripe for purchase. I don't know who else was interested in purchasing REMAX, but I do know that there were other companies that were interested. Those details should be made public in the near future. But REMAX did choose Real because of the tech and the partnership that made sense, not only for their franchise owners, but also for their agents. All right. So number two that I want to talk about is alignment. I mentioned this already, but I think that it's important to say again is that Real and REMAX are going to continue to operate independently of each other. So the Real REMAX group is going to be a holding company over the two brands. And so the easiest way I can explain this is like that. It's kind of like an umbrella. So similar to how Real has hundreds of teams and they all operate independently of each other, it's the same thing that the Real REMAX group is going to have two different companies operating underneath of it. And so when you look at the industry, right, we had Anywhere Real Estate that's now part of Compass International Holdings, but like Compass International Holdings now has Compass, At Properties, Better Homes and Gardens, Coldwell Banker, Christie's, Century 21, ERA, Corcoran, Sotheby's. So all of these brands were under the Anywhere umbrella, and now they're under the Compass International Holdings umbrella. And like when, for how many ever years we've had Realogy and now Anywhere, like all of those brands operated independently of each other. There were some synergies and there were some things as far as like executives and tech and stuff like that. But like, you weren't at the same brokerage if you were a Century 21 agent talking to an ERA agent, right? You were at different brokerages. So Real REMAX Group, Real will be one side of it. And then we'll have, Motto Mortgage and REMAX on the other side. The other thing that I want to talk about is productivity. So REMAX does have two things: the most recognizable brand in real estate and also the most productive agents in the industry. And so how cool is it that Real's tech can help franchise owners to take work off their plate and hopefully streamline some of like the costs and things that they're spending money on, but also help their agents be more productive. So like if we were talking about reasons specifically, that's something that can help their agents to potentially like put in transactions faster, deal with compliance in an easier manner. And like, then if they go from selling 10 or 11 homes a year to like 12 or 15 on average, like that's really cool. And, as I said earlier, like they had a declining agent count. Like when people are selling a lot of homes and they also feel as if they're receiving value from their brokerage, they tend to not leave, right? So just something to think about on that front because they are a very productive brokerage. All right, number four, what I want to talk about is scale. So like if this deal goes through, the Real REMAX Group is going to be the number 2 brokerage by agent count in the country. And with size like that, you've got a seat at the table, especially when you look at things like private listings, coming soon listings, syndication to large portal websites, and stuff like that. And so, I think that the past few months have been very interesting with how things have been going and what has been happening with mergers and acquisitions and brokerages being picked up and things like that. And so, I think that it should be very interesting to see how things continue to progress. All in all, there's still a lot to happen as far as the acquisition, getting approved and shareholder votes and lots of things like that. So like it's not something that it's announced yesterday and now REMAX agents or Real agents or Real agents or Real REMAX agents or anything like that. There's still time for this to go through, but I think that there's definitely some interesting things that could happen. Obviously with having that many agents and productive agents, like as far as some training synergies, there's tons of REMAX offices and like Real's obviously cloud-based. So like if there's any sort of, crossover or connection on that front. I think that it also, Real is only in the United States and Canada and REMAX is in a ton of different countries. It's going to put us into 120 different countries and territories. So it's interesting. And obviously already having operations and knowing how to operate on the international front, especially because there's been a lot of growth for companies like REMAX and EXP and other companies that are international, right? Coldwell Bankers and stuff like that wasn't really on Real's roadmap, I don't think, because we were, really streamlining operations in like the US and Canada. But now having operations and knowing how things work and knowing how escrow accounts work and transactions work and how they get processed and what the expenses are for that, like could be something that is potential in the future. All in all, I think that it's very interesting. Again, nothing is changing in the near future. And if you've got any questions about this, whether you're a real agent, a Remax agent, you're an agent that's considering real, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to chat, and I'll catch you on the next video.